Hi, Remnant friends. I was thinking the other day about times past with Deb and I, my wife, and I was praying that I would learn to walk with God and do His will. And I remember a lot of times saying, Lord, what big thing do you want me to do today? And of course, I can go back to He that is faithful in that which is least will be faithful in that which is much. But on this one particular day, it was wintertime. We were living in Montana, and our kids were small, and they were doing the dishes. It was right after breakfast. It was a nice sunny day, probably about 0 degrees out. It's pretty cold, but out west there, when it was sunny, there was no wind. It was pretty nice. So Deb and I decided to take a walk and told the children to finish the dishes and do their chores, which is not a problem. And so we took this walk, and we was all in a great mood, and Deb and I walked out, and we had our winter clothes on, our boots on, our gloves on, and I'll never forget, we were hanging on hands, swinging our hands back and forth as we was walking up our driveway and then onto the road that in the winter hardly, if there was 2 people a day that went up past our house, it would be a lot. So there wasn't much up there in the wintertime, and we were walking, talking about things. Well, all of a sudden, my wife said something that just really got to me quickly. It irritated me. And so the person that I am, I don't want her to get the best of me. So I said something back. And then she said something back. And then I said something back. And I'm sure some of you can relate to this, or many of you can relate to this. And about that time, we dropped our hands. And she's 5'4" and I'm 6'2", and my legs are longer, and just by normal, I'm walking and she's walking, and I looked back after a little bit and I was quite a ways ahead of her. And here was my prayer to God. I was not happy because she started it. I just want everyone to know she started it, and what she said was not very nice. Even though down the road I realized, and she told me she never meant anything about it. It was the way I took it. But I said, Lord, I've been apologizing to her. I've been trying to be the Christian here in the family, and she's saying these things, and it's about time she apologizes. It's not me that should, it should be her this time. She clearly started this problem. So as I'm praying, the one thing you have to remember when you're praying, you've got to be silent to let God speak to you through the Holy Spirit. And so finally, as I'm talking to God and I'm sharing with Him how much my wife needs to apologize to me for something she did wrong, I was finally quiet. And you know what? The Lord spoke to my heart and said, no, Dwight, you need to apologize. You're the man of the family. I said, but I'm always apologizing now, and she's going to think I'm a wimp if I apologize too many times. I know that sounds silly, but that's what I was thinking. And so anyways, I argued with God. Have you ever tried to argue with God? I don't know about you, but it's never worked out really well for me. But I started to listen, and God shared with me through the Spirit, no, Dwight, it doesn't matter. And then this text came up before me. It's found in Matthew chapter 5, and here's what it says. It says in verse 23, Matthew chapter 5, verse 23, therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar, and there remember that your brother has what? Not that you have something against him, but that he has something against you. And then it says, leave your gift there before the altar. Go your way. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Well, so just remember, we don't just ask for forgiveness if we've committed the crime or the problem or the issue. That's not what the Lord is saying here. If someone has something against you, you need to go and apologize. And so I looked around like this and saw that she's way back there, and I stopped. And I finally gave it all to the Lord. I said, okay, Lord, you're right. I'm wrong. I need to apologize to her. Now, I want you to know that when we dropped our hands, it was like 0 degrees or below 0. I don't know. At times this got to 40 below 0, no wind chill factor in the middle of the winter there in Montana where we live. And all of a sudden, as we were walking to begin with, happy, It was nice and sunny out and beautiful. And we kind of got irritated with one another, and I dropped her hand and I'm ahead of her. All of a sudden things kind of got cold. Well, I'm standing there and I turn around and I waited for her to catch up. And she looked up with me with those beautiful eyes of hers. She never said a word. I looked back and I said, Deb, will you forgive me? And I want you to know this, I can see it as I speak to you right now. The tears just blew right out of her eyes, right off her cheeks, and right onto the ground. What a blessing that was. And she started crying and she says, oh, I'm sorry too. And so we hung on each other and hugged each other and forgave each other. And then in that cold weather, we got on our knees, hanging on the hands, asking for the Lord to give us wisdom and give us a more loving heart, that we would learn from these things that we did. I want you to know today that it's not always about you. And many times it's not about you at all. Always think of somebody else. It doesn't matter always if they're right or if they're wrong. Just because they're wrong doesn't mean maybe you said things wrong. See, when Deb said something wrong, I came back and said something. In other words, I didn't diffuse the issue. So sometimes people can get you frustrated and you, without thinking, say something back. Well, when you do, is that of the Lord? Did you say it in the right way? Did you say it with a loving spirit? Or was the Lord trying to tell you to be quiet when you spoke? And that was me. So if you would do those things and have quiet time with God and spend more time with your spouse and not worry about all the things that you do right, you might get along a lot better. Try it. Let me know what you think. God bless.